Alright, fellas, we're back with another fight night weekend. This time we've got Grant Dawson taking on Bobby Green in the main event, and I know a lot of people aren't rocking with that main event because it's kind of lackluster. Like, only one of the fighters are even ranked, which is kind of odd. But, you know, I really fuck with Bobby Green, so at the end of the day, I'm not mad at this, and I've always felt like Grant Dawson is, like, super slept on. 20-1. I even picked against him in his last fight, so you can say that I'm sleeping on him, too. In my last 415 UFC fights, 271 dubs. Over the last month, I only lost 3 fights, guys, so we did really well in the month of September. But let's move on to the first fight of the night. Montana De La Rosa taking on JJ Aldrich. This first opening part of the card is going to be so 50-50, so hit or miss for a lot of people. A lot of people are going to start out going either 0-3 or like 1-2, and then you're going to have the people that get lucky and get the straight 3-0. I'm going to be picking Montana De La Rosa by a decision, but it's so close with JJ Aldrich. They both are kind of middling fighters that are like decent in the women's divisions, but don't really have it all. Then we have Richie Lang taking on Johnny Munoz Jr. I'm going to go with Johnny Munoz Jr. simply because he hasn't been damaged as much throughout his career. And, he has been finished, don't get me wrong, but it was by somebody like Tony Gravely. I feel like Richie Lang is going to be putting him through the ringer in the first round like he does a lot of his opponents. But Johnny Munoz is going to survive and start to land better shots, on the feet, pick his shots, maybe even mix it up, go for the grappling, because I would say Johnny Munoz Jr. is a much better grappler. So I'm going by a decision for Johnny Munoz as well. Then Vanessa Demopoulos taking on Kanako Murata. Demopoulos is just not that good. She got hype a little bit. I think this is the girl that jumped in Joe Rogan and Bisping's arms. Maybe not. I could be tripping. But overall, Vanessa Demopoulos just isn't as good of a fighter, I feel like. We could find out that Karako sucks. This is how this happens in the UFC a lot. But I'm going to have to just side with Kanako Murata and hope that she can get it done. And hope that I could 3-0 at the beginning of the card, because now we're on to picks that I'm a little bit more confident in. Nathan Menez taking on Mateus Mendoka. I'm going to go with Mateus. I feel like his first fight in the UFC was, it's pretty hard for you to get anywhere when you have to face somebody like Javid Bashrat on your debut. But you know what? He didn't look terrible in that. And, I don't know. I just feel like with Nathan Menez, we've seen enough from him, and the only department that he's really that good is in the striking with his boxing, and I feel like he's too chinny regardless of that, so not enough kicks and whatnot in his arsenal. I'm going Mateus. Then Karolina Kowalkiewicz taking on Deanna Belbita. I'm going with Karolina Kowalkiewicz. I feel like she's kind of putting together a streak for herself. She was like the one female fighter on the roster with the longest losing streak, and now she's turning it around. She kind of looks a little bit hot too. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen the face-offs between these two. They kind of like hug each other and like wave to the camera. They can both get it. That's all I'm going to say. Deanna Belbita, I feel like she's going to be on the other end of a split decision. I feel like it's going to be a super close fight. The judges are going to call it 2 rounds for 1. They're going to see it correctly, and then one judge is going to be a cuck and ruin it and have it for somebody else. Moving on, Felipe Lins taking on Ion Cutelaba. This is the prelim headliner. Sadly, a fucking awesome fight with Montel Jackson and Chris Gutierrez got pulled off the card. That was like my favorite card on the whole fight, honestly. But, in its place, we have Felipe Lins and Ion Cutelaba. I'm going to trust Felipe Lins to get this done. I should have trusted him against OSB earlier this year, and I didn't. And that shit sits with me. It's a big regret, because I feel like Felipe Lins is actually sneaky good at light heavyweight. And Ion Cutelaba, he's been around for a couple years in the UFC now, but he's just proven to be super hit or miss. Against some fighters that like you just wouldn't expect, he's able to get the dub, and then against others that you would think he'd be able to just absolutely wash, he's getting murked. Light heavyweight isn't even that steep of competition either until you get into the top 10, so that's just disappointing. Moving on, featherweight division, Alexander Hernandez taking on Bill Algeo. This is so tough to call because on paper Alexander Hernandez is way better, and at lightweight I feel like this wouldn't even be much of a question. But this is featherweight, where Bill Algeo is a similar style to all of the people that have beaten Hernandez. Someone like Billy Quarantillo, for example. Somebody that just has like high pressure, weird strikes on the feet, has a chin, has a great gas tank, and will just keep coming at you. I feel like he's going to melt Alexander Hernandez after one hard round of fighting that Alex is probably going to win by landing the slightly better shots, because he does look good when he's on. He just quickly switches off, and that's the problem with Hernandez. And that's the problem with trying to call his fights. So I'm going to have to go the safe pick. I'm going to go Bill Algeo. Sorry, guys. I know usually I go the crazy picks, but I'm picking Algeo. And then we have Drew Dober taking on Rick Glenn. This one should be easy as fuck to call on paper. But again, this is mixed martial arts, and at the end of the day, anything can happen. Nothing's easy to call. I'm expecting Drew Dober to go out there, defend the takedowns, and absolutely just wash Rick Glenn on the feet. He's way stronger. He has better combinations. He's good at catching you, cutting off the cage, and then catching you big with that left hook. The only thing I could see Rick Glenn really, I guess like in the midst of a firefight, if he blasts down, shoots a double, quickly is able to like take the back and get a rear naked, but I can't really see that happening. So I got to go with Drew Dober. And then the feature fight of the night, Alex Morono taking on Joaquin Buckley. I don't know why Joaquin started out as such a favorite. This fight is way closer than I feel like the odds makers are, or even the fans are kind of like giving it. I'm going to have to go with Joaquin Buckley, even though I'm saying all this and preaching all this, because I think Alex Morono just doesn't have the same type of power and the same arsenal of weapons to throw, like different types of techniques to throw and whatnot. But what he is good at, I feel like he's better than Joaquin. He's better at getting on his bike and picking the right shots and then fading back and then changing levels, going for takedowns. Like he's good at what he does in that department. It's why he was on a win streak for such a long time. But I'm still going to have to side with Joaquin Buckley. I feel like he's just proven himself against better competition. And even his fight with Nasution Mavlov, where he got demolished a little bit in the rounds that he did lose, he made it a closer fight than most people have made with Nasruddin, unless you're Sean Strickland, and that's the champ now. So yeah, I gotta side with Joaquin Buckley. Then we got Joe Pyfer taking on Abdul Razak Al Hassan. This is a really fucking good fight. I'm glad they made it the co-main event because it's explosive. Anything can happen. Either of these fighters can get knocked out, even though it does seem like on paper Joe Pyfer should be able to go in here and just really own the cage. Let's just say that. That's the type of person he is too. He wants to go in there and just own that shit. And I feel like he needs to get in there and honestly make it a firefight instantly. Just make it a scrap. Don't go in there and try to make it a clean fight, because I feel like on paper, clean technical kickboxing fight, I would trust Abdul Razak Al Hassan more. Even though he has those 5 losses, it's a little bit of trickery, because if you look at the losses on paper, it's not to people that are like a Joe Pyfer style. In fact, the people that have the Joe Pyfer style, he does a lot better against. So I will be siding with Joseph Pyfer. It's not at all bad to pick the underdog and bet on Abdul Razak by... you could honestly bet under a round and by a finish. You could double prop that shit, and I bet it would still hit, because this is the type of fight that we have, and I love it. And then we have the main event of the night, Bobby Green taking on Grant Dawson, who's 20-1. One of the most slept-on fighters in the UFC. He's kind of just built himself up slowly in the shadows. And I'm not going to lie, I definitely thought he was going to lose his last fight, but he absolutely demolished Damir Ismagulov, and that was really impressive. And now he's getting Bobby Green, a completely different style, not one of those lightweight freaks that you think could be in the top 5 or like champion one day, like what Damir was. It's not somebody like that. It's somebody that we know how his style is, we know how you neutralize it, and Grant Dawson literally has the perfect style to neutralize Bobby Green. So I would be kind of stupid to not side with Grant Dawson. Obviously, it's MMA, anything can happen, but Bobby Green's just getting old, and I don't feel like he still has it in him to grind through early rounds of wrestling or just keep doing it all the way through 5 rounds and still have that urge to put some hands on somebody. I could be wrong. Maybe he comes out here and he absolutely washes Grant Dawson. He's just too good on the feet, too slick. Grant's not able to take him down and Bobby wins a unanimous decision. Or even better, Bobby puts him out. I think that would be way better case scenario for the UFC and for storylines. Grant Dawson can afford to take a loss to an old vet. Bobby Green can't really afford to lose to Grant Dawson if he wants to continue to have big fights or more hyped up matchups in the future. So I'm going to have to side with Grant Dawson. I think he's probably going to be able to find his takedowns early. He knows what he needs to do, and he's a smart, cerebral fighter. So he's going to take him down quickly, try to look for subs or something. And if he can't get that, because Bobby Green is kind of tough, I could see him just laying praying for a decision. So those are going to be my picks for tonight's fights. If you guys agree, disagree, whatever, let me hear it in the comments, and I'll catch y'all when the fights come. See y'all.